Okay, so Bill Tai. This man is truly a legend in the world of venture investing. He's been involved in disruptive digital technologies since the 1980s. He's kite surfed and invested his way into helping many of the big names in tech get their early funding. People like Zoomer, Canva, a whole host of others. And he first started mining Bitcoin in 2010. Bill's going to be joined by one of the leading lights, the new rising stars of investing. She's been around a little bit, but she's truly one of the new players here. Amy Wu, formerly of Lightspeed Ventures and now heading up growth and venture at FTX. And they'll be joined by Staci, Warden, the CEO of Algorand Foundation, who'll be moderating this session. So please, a big round of applause and a welcome for our panel.
I see we lost a few people. You know what you guys need to do? You need to introduce some legislation. Next time, next year, you're going to introduce some legislation, and then you'll get the packed room. I do feel sorry for everybody that left before this session, though, because these two really are visionaries. I mean, this is the right title for this session. I have not known you very long, but you've had a storied career, and I've known Bill for a while now. And the insights that I think we'll get both on the micro and on the macro about where we're headed are going to come from this panel, ladies and gentlemen, so don't go anywhere. Amy, let me start with you. I mean, let's just start by kind of addressing the 800-pound gorilla in the room. You know, we are in you would never know it by the people at Consensus. I mean, you would never know, but we are actually in a bear market. You know, and as a CEO of the Algorand Foundation, it's dispiriting. You know, we are, like, just speaking for us, we are doing so much. I mean, we have basically a Cambrian explosion of things going on our chain. We have all these partnerships. We have a partnership with FIFA. And it's just like, you know, crypto doesn't care kind of thing, you know? And so how do you think about this bear market? This is not your first bear market, right? This is not your first crypto winter. How do you think about it, and how do you think about it compared to some of the earlier ones? And how do you think we're positioned as an ecosystem more broadly to get out of it, if we will? I mean, the naysayers are writing off Bitcoin and whatnot. So you have a lot of money under management. How are you thinking about it?
Yeah, it's a good question. That is definitely, we're talking about this all the time. You know, what is the state of the market right now? Certainly, you can say it's soft. You know, whether it's a bear market, we'll see. I started investing in crypto in 2017, so a bit later than a lot of folks here, actually. But, you know, kind of started at the last bull market and then saw the 2018, 2019 winter, and then, you know, now we're potentially going into another one. I would say that so this is like the 5th crypto cycle, I think. You know, there's been multiple bear and bull cycles, right? Every time there's been somewhat of like an order of magnitude increase in adoption, right? Whether it's versus cryptographers, and then it's maybe like the drug dealers, and then it's the first retail speculators in 2017, and then it's the builders of the first kind of like DeFi builders in the last cycle, and also sort of prop trading funds. And in 2018, in 2019 particularly, so many people left the industry, and certainly crypto was not really top of mind for builders, news, traders alike in this much. And that has really not happened at all this time, right? In fact, I feel like, in the volatile markets, it's actually been more of a topic of conversation. And I think it reflects the fact that tech builders have come into the space, and they have a long-term view in the technology adoption, and also a time frame in terms of like how long they're building also on the blockchain, and also mainstream companies like FANG, et cetera, are also have a curiosity that is reflected in blockchain potentially being more of a definite technology shift in the future rather than this hypothetical, more experimental technology.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're a developer, if you got to commit, you got to commit. You know, that was a GitHub joke for anybody out there. But, and they also, I think it gives you some sense of opportunity. So when, Mt. Gox failed, out of the ashes of Mt. Gox came things like Kraken and Chainalysis. They spot opportunities. So I don't think I nailed you down, though. So let me just ask you a bit more, pointedly. How long is this going to last, and when are we going to come out of it?
If I knew that, I'd be a very rich person, and so would FTX Ventures.
What are the tea leaves you're looking at, though, on it?
I mean, we generally feel like more likely that it's not a V-shaped recovery, and that we're probably in for a longer-term softness. And so, right now on the venture side, I mean, also on the liquid token side, entry price valuation matters, right? We also are orienting around teams, but like, as always, that are long-term oriented. And so these are some of the things we're thinking about.
Yeah. Bill, can I ask you to start by visionarying backwards a little, maybe, and provide us a longer term, provide us, if you will, a framework for thinking about this, not just myopically in the crypto ecosystem, but more broadly for how these technologies and these trends kind of how, because with an understanding of how we've evolved to where we are now, I think it gives you a good basis for thinking about how we can evolve going forward. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
I think, back to your question also about the bear market and what happens, I think it's a great resetting process that actually frees up, it creates liquidity in resources that are not necessarily money, right? So in every cycle, on the up cycle, you get a lot of people that chase whatever dream they're after, lock into a company, they're stuck because of options that are in the money, and the system gets sort of empty of people resources to go do the next thing. And in every crash, what happens is it's like a giant reset button gets hit where new problems arise to be solved and everyone comes free. So it's kind of like, all the molecules get thrown out and they land and they can reassemble into whatever's next. And every single down cycle has brought incredible new opportunities. And if you go back to the old tech stuff, when the semiconductor industry got over capacity and prices were like nil because everybody just took whatever revenue they could get, that created the fabless semiconductor industry, and all of the products that were built on the chip industry were a lot cheaper because of that downturn. Same with the telco bust. When the 98, 99 telco buildup turned into a big bust, the internet was free. So kids like Mark Zuckerberg could sit in a dorm room and code up Facebook, and that wouldn't have happened in the middle part of the 90s. You had to build your own data center to build a web company. So all that stuff became free. And I think in this one, it's more of a people resource thing, but so many people got drawn into the industry, got their first taste, weren't really sure exactly what they were doing, but they're like walking around on moving icebergs, and now I think it's all going to reset. So, and I don't think it's going to be a hard reset like it was in 2018, 2019. And you can see it from the energy level here. And the waves of innovation that are on us now are formed enough where things are going to carry because they don't have a lot of cost structure. In the older cycle of crypto, we didn't have a ton of cost structure, but there weren't that many things to work on. And I think a lot of the last boomlet was built on all those ICOs. There were a lot of promises and broken dreams. And now I think we've moved from kind of, weird niche technology promises to build microeconomies around in a token to other digital asset environments that are real. Whether it's like, eBay moving from physical collectibles to digital collectibles with one example, or so many of the marketplaces that are trading real products where there's a digital certificate in effect representing the physical asset. So we're finally moving into this world that's kind of an internet of assets.
Yeah, so I want to pick up on your comment about not enough things to work on. I think that's not true now. Now there's a lot to work on. So what are we working on? I mean, you mentioned sort of the digitization or the tokenization of assets, but there are so many things that you can think of as like strict DeFi, degen type stuff, all the way to things like remittances and payments in the real world. And so, what is exciting for you guys in the short term and sort of more the medium term? Like, put your visionary hats on, and what is going to survive this, and what's going to bubble to the top, and what are we going to be talking about kind of in the next year and, several years out? Yeah. Why don't you start this time? Yeah.
I
Take all the good stuff though from Amy. Just leave her some things.
I'm just really excited to see finally like a world of community-based businesses that are scalable and at scale. Because I think if you...
What do you mean by that? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the venture business and the technology business of the 80s and 90s, the products it was more product driven than it was community driven. You'd build a better, faster, cheaper router or a box or something that was a product, and everything now is kind of a mini metaverse. And so it's a world now where you can create virtual nations around token or digital assets that are moving around, right? So each product company in a way is like its own universe, and many of them will have these conferences like Salesforce Dreamforce or Zoom with Zoomtopia or whatever to try to get an ecosystem around what products they're building. But now I think the economic activity is really, it's almost like microcurrencies. And I've used this.
It's almost like what?
That's right.
It's almost like what? I missed the word.
Like microcurrencies. I've used this analogy with you before about, when people got off the boat to set up colonies in America and drew lines around forests, and they declared this is New York and this is Virginia or whatever, everybody had their own currency, right? So now we're removing the geographic boundaries and having thematic-based virtual nations or communities of people that believe in the same thing. And we're in a world now of multiple overlapping communities of interest where somebody can be a member of a bunch of them. And every one of those has its own digital asset ecosystem. So that is real GDP, right? There's real value being traded around. That's a totally different thing than selling a product, and it's more scalable. And you can set them up anywhere. So it's a beautiful world to invest in.
Okay, it's a beautiful world to invest in because you put it in a very nice light. But let me put it in a not so nice light for you and just have you respond. I mean, it is also can be very tribalistic and very kind of us versus them, and you see that a little bit in kind of the ecosystem wars. And so how, do you think there's a way through that, or do you think I'm overstating the problem, or just...
It can be tribalistic, but it's also very fluid. So it's almost like, you can, because people have multiple interests, they can hop from one thing to another, right? And societal structure is very much changing from the third industrial revolution where people were kind of very vertically siloed and trapped in a company and working on one function like a monkey in a box working on an assembly line. Now, I'll bet like more than 80% of the people in this audience work on more than one job. They probably work on 3 or 4 jobs, right?
Okay,
so,
let's see a show of hands, actually.
How many people in this room are working on more than one thing? There you go.
Okay,
so it's kind of like,
if you had asked this question
in the 1950s, everybody would have one job.
Right.
So we're moving to a world of very liquid resources that can apply their energy wherever they want to, when they want to, and you're far more productive when you're working on something you want to work on than with Mr. Boss telling you, you got to do this, and it's 80 times an hour, not 20. So you're getting dinged and paid. So it's like it's a much better world.
What's scary about that, though, is I think I just saw my COO put his hand up, so we'll have to have a discussion about that afterwards. Okay, so Amy, what do you like? Or start with what do you think, and then maybe I'll ask you what you like.
Yeah, I had a couple of thoughts, in this conversation. The first is, I just want to reflect on a comment that you started with, which is that we're in the bear market, and I would argue that we're not in a bear market yet.
Okay.
Yeah, as in, I feel like in the last bear market, in the last bear market, actually the loss of token value is more severe than what we've seen so far. I mean, and I want to say I think we still have a ways to go in potential kind of like general trough of disillusionment in this technology adoption cycle right now.
Did you just say that you think it's going to get worse before it gets
better?
As
in it can, right? As in certainly so far, in this cycle, it wasn't as steep of a drop as the last one. And so, and it's interesting because I think a lot of crypto funds believe that there's definitely room for, so far there's been a lot of loss of value in altcoins, but actually in kind of the blue chip tokens have lost some value, but really, there's more room to go there. And also even on the NFT side, there's still new projects and there's room there. But I would argue kind of optimistically that despite like this expectation almost that there's actually more room for loss of value, that that builders are very much not losing steam. And actually, like, at FTX Ventures, like, we have a lot of partners with us, whether it's Jump and, like, others, and then of course the teams that we back, and there's this great enthusiasm, but also realization of like how early we are. Like you mentioned, like, what are the areas that we're excited about? We're super excited about infrastructure, and because we're still at the blockchain infrastructure layer.
Okay, tell me about that.
So, like, there's a lot of institutions here at Consensus, right? A lot of traditional financial institutions here, like, large tech companies, and they want to understand, as always, sort of where are we in the state of like blockchain infrastructure development, right? If we were to actually launch a mainstream app with tens of millions of daily active users, what is the state of the blockchain infrastructure to support that? And like, I think generally we think that it's too early to support right now, right? I don't think there's like a single blockchain right now that can even come close to actually running an application of that size. And
Algorand does 6,000 transactions per second by the summer, just to throw that in
Go
there.
Algorand.
Woohoo!
4.5 second final settlement, sub-penny transaction fees, but carry on.
This is a plug for Algorand first. But like, when it comes to like standards, right, for developers, and to the extent that they have developing on like, Apple or Android and iOS and like some of the other, platforms, I mean, we're very far from that. And so I think we recognize that and see the opportunity. And so we're both excited to work with the layer 1 and layer 2 blockchain ecosystems to actually like develop that together, and also back teams that are doing that and developing sort of standards and DevOps tooling to make it easier to track the next couple million developers into blockchain.
Okay, I don't want to get either of you.
Can I jump in? What my observation on this? So, I spent many, many decades tuning myself as an equity investor. And when this token economy thing came up, it was like this weird to like, what? How do these things? But if you think about, I had to get my head around a concept, which is, like, think about how somebody decides to invest in a currency. Like, why does somebody pick a yen because they think it's going to get stronger, or a euro, or whatever it is, right? It's based on the health of the underlying economy. So we've got all these people in tech that have always looked at the equity value, but what you're really trying to figure out is which economy is going to be really strong. And why is it going to be strong? Part of it's the infrastructure, the roads worked right? Like, you see these Ukraine-Russia things where they show some of the roads in the little towns in Russia, and it's like, they're mud. So there's high friction. That's like high transaction costs in the blockchain. So how do you make an economy frictionless so that the GDP goes, and with it, the currency is going to be strong? So that's kind of what we're all trying to figure out.
Yeah, and on the tribalism point, it's interesting because at a high level, I think of it as like the blockchain ecosystems versus not the blockchain ecosystems, right? But I think you're actually you're also referring to the tribalisms within individual blockchain ecosystems, which also happen, and it's inevitable because, for example, at FTX we not only invest, we also build on these blockchain ecosystems. We provide liquidity. We actually do a lot. And actually our investment philosophy is we start at the infrastructure level, and then we essentially are putting resources, capital and otherwise into that, and then also essentially helping with the develop and also invest in the application layer as well. And I think that's what you're referring to, which is why there is some tribalism, because there are some dozens of layer 1, layer 2 blockchains right now, and finite resources to build on.
Right. So let me ask, and not to kind of get either of you in trouble, but what's not going to make it in the medium term? I mean, is there something that you find a bit more frivolous, maybe, that is not, They're very politic, the two of them. Do you see that? They're not going to answer this question.
I don't have a good answer for you on that, because I think I definitely felt like that in 2017, 2018, because I think the structure of what was acting like and actually delivering for short periods of time what seemed to be economic growth were promises for niche technologies that might deliver some function if you bought into the ICO and you gave a team a bunch of money so that they could eventually build it. But the capital raises were so big, everybody got lazy and never did anything. And not everybody, but but we're not now living in so much of a world of false promises. It's a lot like penny stocks, where people promote the heck out of stuff and they drive this market value and then the teams take the money and run, like the rug pull, right? So I guess in this world, I think because enough sanity is in the system and people got burned enough, yeah, there was a little less scrutiny when the speculators were making money on everything about 12 months ago, but the scrutiny is getting higher. The authenticity and the quality of projects by definition has to go up. So I don't see a bunch of big fails right in front of us.
Okay, I still have an answer for you.
Okay,
Okay,
lay it on me.
For me, the answer is like DeFi staking.
Okay, all right, okay, tell us about that.
So I think that right now there is, obviously, there's proof of stake staking, this has utility, right? As in it's helping with the, promote the security of the blockchain, but there are some projects that are replacing that are putting aside a significant percentage of their token circulation into just dropping as airdrops and staking rewards for their existing users, and that is not a replacement for building real product, right? So on the venture side, we are really looking for projects, and we look at their tokenomics, and we want to see that they're using their token supply, not just airdropping that, but actually to incentivize real building and real product building. And yes, of course, some amount of it makes sense to acquire users and retain users. And it's not dissimilar to marketing expense, but marketing expense should not be 80% of your revenues. Or actually just 100%, et cetera. So this is one concept where I definitely have a bit of an allergic reaction, when our portfolio companies are allocating kind of just huge amounts of their treasury to just airdrops, because I think you're just kicking the can down the road to your users unlocking and then just churning from your products.
Yeah. I mean, for sure that happens.
I like that filter because I think in an up market, there are businesses, there are things that look like businesses. So there's kind of a general rule in any venture thing. It's kind of like if you can find something that makes people money, then it's probably a good business, right? But there are different ways to do that. If you have a business that really unlocks fundamental value or reduces costs, so there's an economic savings, that's a little bit more durable. In bull markets, you have these moments where things look like you make money by speculating. And those are very pro-cyclical, so the profit margins, they look really good for a while, but then they're pro-cyclical on the way down and they can collapse. Terra Luna was a little bit like that too, right? So I think that's kind of what you're talking about when people are just staking and you think you're making money, but it's not really based on value creation. It's just making money because someone else made money and you're making money on top of their money.
Totally.
It's stacked risk.
Yeah. Okay. Let me periscope out for the last kind of 5 or 6 minutes that we have, and I'll ask the question and give you guys a chance to kind of think about it. But if we assume the success of this ecosystem more broadly, and we look out kind of not just this year to 5 years, but 5 years to 10 years to 25 years, what in a kind of best case scenario does the world look like? How do you see a crypto blockchain ecosystem? I mean, is it private chains? Is it public chains? What kinds of things are they working on? What not? What are they successfully disintermediating versus maybe running side by side? What are the niches, just broadly? And then a second kind of part of that, sister part of that question is, what's happening to traditional markets and traditional finance and traditional payments rails as a result? And for me, it's not so much, you can answer both ways actually, but I'm not asking it less as a prediction than as a, when you see the world that you would like to see, what does it look like? Yeah? Yeah, Bill. It's tough to go after Bill, though. I do want to warn you. Yeah.
Way back, not that way back, but sometime around 2016 or 2017.
Way back, huh? In crypto years, that's way back. Yeah.
I did a video for a company called Fluidity that ended up launching the first real DEX. And Futurism did that video. So you can Google search this because at the time, after I did it, I was a little embarrassed because I thought I just went over my skis. I said something that I actually believed, but I shouldn't have said it, because I said at the time that there would be, in the future, based on this technology, there would be companies that were 2 to 3 orders of magnitude larger than Google. Okay, and when I said that, I actually did believe it, and I believe it more now. But at the time, I was like, oh my God, that's like so over the top. How's that ever going to be possible? Like, that's 100 to 1,000 times bigger? That's just not possible. And the reason I was thinking that, which is becoming more real, is if you think about what Google does in organizing the world's information, the information is valuable, and the monetization of that moving of the information is done through clicks that generate a few bucks, a few cents, a few bucks, right? But we're moving from an internet of information to an internet of assets. So if you think of the value of the asset that is actually getting like the matrix, turned into a bunch of green ones and zeros and down to the phone line and out the other side, those are pieces of value that are 100 to 1,000 times per click more than the pennies to dollars that you monetize through just the viewing of information. So I think I'm actually right. I just don't know when that's going to happen. So I think what I see is that the unlocking of highly liquid marketplaces in every vertical is happening. And when I see things like, and I talked about this on the Necker Summit years ago, if you were to build something like Uber today, you wouldn't build a proprietary software system. Instead of sending a Bitcoin, you'd send a car on a blockchain for 5 minutes, right? So I think Uber looks like Prodigy or CompuServe or AOL in the late 80s. A private network of information assets where it all moved to an open internet that was highly liquid and massively scalable. So we're going from that model of marketplace models around like a private software system like Uber to anything can be transferred like that, right? And now there's a lot of regulatory friction that prevents some markets from happening fast, but we're going to move from pennies a transaction to millions of dollars a transaction in houses. So it's going to happen. I just don't know when. So watch that futurism video from like 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay, Amy, what would your kind of perfect world look like?
So a couple of different ways to approach this. When you look out at 10 to 20 years and at the next, let's say, dozen of $100 billion companies or plus, like trillion-dollar companies that might be created in that time, it's difficult not to see that at least some percentage of them will be crypto-native companies. Transforming key industries of like financial services or entertainment, but I also think that there's going to be some number of incumbents who will be there as well, right? Who will have acquired or have learned organically this the crypto knowledge and also like how to build the communities in addition to the technology, right? Because both are pretty important here, and so I think it's going to be some combination of that we will see happen. And this new crop of like crypto native, web sort of like blockchain native companies that might be, I think we probably will see some form of like infrastructure players there, and then also, personally, I'm excited about the prospects of potentially the next bull market being driven by mainstream crypto adoption, led by a killer consumer internet app that actually is, natively embedding Web3 elements like fungible, non-fungible tokens, right? I think we haven't seen that yet today, and that's also another area that'd be super exciting, and maybe that will come out of an incumbent. Maybe it'll come out of like a new startup, right? Like at FTX, we hope to partner with the incumbent that does that, and then invest in the ones that are that are new companies. And as for like payments and some of the more heavily regulated like traditional industries, it would be amazing. I mean, I think we have seen kind of the power of blockchain and how it can reduce sort of transaction costs and increase like transaction speeds and kind of democratize like some of these financial services across the world. That vision has taken longer than I think most people would have expected, having been like for those who have been in crypto for like almost a decade at this point, right?
That was the promise originally.
So if we're looking at the next 10 to 20 year time frame, maybe that will happen. I think this is where regulatory decisions are made are going to make a pretty big difference.
Yeah.
And so we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, I love this about, and so Bill, I'll give you a chance to just give in one sentence an impact prediction, but I love this, the democratization of capital. I mean, this would be an amazing world to live in if we could live in a world like that. And final word to you on an impact and making the world a better place. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, well, you know, the other beautiful thing, there's so many beautiful things about the way things are going in society. There's some bad things too, but you know, one of the really wonderful things is the awareness of this next generation on why we need to fix all the things that our and the prior generation messed up.
Speak for yourself. I mean, I'm just...
Yeah, and you know, I think, and you see it everywhere. And you know, the way people make decisions on purchasing products, if you do something that's bad for the planet, you lose customers. And if you do something good for the planet, you gain a lot of customers. And so I think the whole world is moving to this world of, you know, do well by doing good, supporting businesses that actually stand for something positive. And I think, you know, crypto is one of the, like, it's like kind of the white hot tip of the spear for this generation of people thinking that. And you see so many businesses now that are able to marshal the power of communities of interest to drive good things. And, you know, there's some startups I'm involved with, like Metagood, for example, that, you know, really fascinating. Like the On-Chain Monkey collection, the trading profits went, like, it's like a little magic wand, like, boom, funding the evacuation of Afghan girl from the Taliban to get her off to Italy. Or boom, there's internet in schools in Rwanda. Boom, you know, like, it's just cool what you can do that you couldn't come up with these kinds of businesses in the 80s or 90s. So it's just awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome. Okay, visionaries are what, ladies and gentlemen? Can you give a big round of applause to my panelists? Thank you so much, you guys. It's just always such a pleasure to talk to you both.